Yes, we slept till 14:45. So, but it was good. I was up at 7, did some email, and then went back to bed.
I actually get you another surprise.
Oh, yes. Uh-oh.
Look at it.
Oh my.
Oh, my God.
And it's a bamboo.
Yes,
Can
it
you tell
is.
that? And you can open it. And you just see what is it inside.
Right. Wow. Oh. Oh, my goodness. Oh, that is spectacular.
So fuzzy.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
You can have it.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are more than welcome.
This is beautiful. Very cute. I like it.
Okay, shall we start
Yes.
it? All right. When did you first start your novel?
My first novel came out in 1990, so 33 years ago, I wrote my first book. It came out 33 years ago, but I started writing it in 1982. So 41 years ago was the first time I tried to write a book, and it actually saw print 1990. Golden Fleece was the name of the book.
Wow. So what was your job before becoming the science fiction writer?
So I've always been a writer, but not of science fiction. I wrote nonfiction. I wrote articles for Canadian newspapers and magazines. In the 1980s, it was the beginning of the personal computer revolution. So my specialty was writing articles about how computers would change business and change home life, and I did a lot of writing about that. I also wrote a lot about the industry of broadcasting in Canada and on personal finance, on investment and so forth. But I was making a living as a writer, but at my heart was writing science fiction.
So what was your experience when you have the personal computer revolution? What was it?
Yes, that first novel I started writing on a typewriter. And it was complete change for a writer to be able to very easily edit. This is so different from having to do it on a typewriter. Typewriter is a terrible machine because you have to go completely beginning to end. You can't go back on a typewriter, right?
What if you made a mistake?
If you make a mistake or if you decide you just want to edit, the only way to change is to retype the whole thing. It's terrible. So it was the best technology for writers. I think more than anybody in the whole world, writers benefited. Whether you were a creative writer or a secretary or somebody even just writing letters to other people, you benefited more than anybody else from the personal computer.
So from the very beginning, you write with pen?
When I was young, but I saved my money and very early bought a typewriter, electric typewriter, and I sold it some years ago. Now I regret that I sold it because it would be nice to have on my shelf as that's how I started, but I needed the money more than I needed the typewriter back then.
What was the atmosphere of creation during your time in the West?
The atmosphere of creation.
Yes.
It was very interesting because I was at the end of the peak period of science fiction in the West. Science fiction in the West started 97 years ago, 1926, the first science fiction magazine, amazing. 26. The very first science fiction magazine in the West was founded, Amazing Stories. So in 3 years, it'll be 100 years, there's been a thing called science fiction. The founder of Amazing Stories, Hugo Gernsback, after whom the Hugo Award is named. He named our field science fiction. So we've had science fiction for 97 years. The first, let's say, 1920s to the mid to late 1930s, garbage. We wrote terrible stuff. It was just, we called it pulp literature, and it was just, had very little literary value. Starting in the late 1930s through to the mid-1960s was a period where science fiction really struggled to become an art form, to have great characterization, great language use, interesting ideas. So you'll find that many science fiction stories, starting with 1939 actually, which is when John W. Campbell took over Analog, or Astounding Stories, our leading magazine. Starting there, many of those stories are still read today. They're reprinted in anthologies and taught at universities. Before that date, nothing. It's not worth reading. That experimental period continued to the 1960s. And then science fiction suddenly became commercially successful, not just artistically, but then the big corporations with their big publishing companies started shaping science fiction. And by the 1970s, of course, the big turning point was Star Wars, 1977. And I was just 17 years old, so this is all before I started writing science fiction. But there was, when I started writing, my first story I sold 1980, 3 years after Star Wars. There was still a period, I think, from 1980 to about 2000, maybe 2010, where in the West you could make a living writing ambitious science fiction. Not just entertainment, not just spaceships and ray guns, but thoughtful, philosophical.
Insight.
Yes, exactly, science fiction. And make a good living at it. I made a good living. Many of the writers who've come here from the West for this convention made a good living doing it. My friend Ken MacLeod, who's just arrived, I've seen on WeChat, from Scotland, make a good living. But that's disappearing. Now there is so much science fiction being pumped out so quickly by amateur authors and self-published on Amazon Kindle and so forth, that the market, the value of science fiction has gone down. Those of us who used to get a good amount of money for our books and a much smaller amount of money for our books now. One of my great colleagues, Spider Robinson, a science fiction writer born in the United States but decided to like Canada better, and so he came to Canada. Lives in Canada, and we were talking just last year, just before Christmas last year, 2022. And Spider said to me, you know, Rob, we're the luckiest guys in the world because we got in to science fiction at the right time. We made out like bandits, which is an expression that means we made a lot of money. We did well. And we're getting out at the right time. Spider is 75 and I'm 63. We're basically at retirement age. We don't have to worry about trying to make a living writing science fiction anymore because except for those people who are writing mindless action adventure that they can turn out 2, 3, 4, 5 books a year of this. They're the ones who are making a living now. People who take a year, 2 years, even 5 years to write a book, there's no economic way to do it anymore. So the great ambitious works of science fiction, works like Three Body Problem here, or Dune, the Dune book by Frank Herbert in the States, which is the most famous American science fiction novel that took years to write. There's no economic way to do that anymore. So I was lucky that my career coincided with the last period in which one could have a really good career writing science fiction and doing nothing else. I never had to be a carpenter in my spare time. I made a living. But for young people today who want to do ambitious, thoughtful, politically aware, environmentally conscious science fiction of big ideas that takes lots and lots of research to write, they're going to have a very hard time in North America. But I see that still developing here in China, that China's history of science fiction as a commercial literature, as a viable profession, is about 30, 40 years behind where we are in North America. So you are still in your peak period and growing. This is why I'm so excited to be here and talking to young Chinese writers, because I know that 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, they will still be writing powerful, important, world-changing science fiction, not just of interest to the Chinese people, but to all thoughtful people on the entire planet. And the future of science fiction is very much here in China.
Do you encourage the young people to choose science fiction writer as their full-time job?
So I think that in North America, I would say no, not in North America. Write science fiction, but study something else and have some other profession. In fact, when people ask me if they want to be a fiction writer of any type, not just science, but maybe mystery, thriller, romance, whatever, say study anything at university except creative writing. Because that, you have to have something you can fall back on. You have to have some other area of expertise. First, it'll just be good for your writing. You will know things besides how to write. You'll know things to write about. But also, you may have to make a living some other way. So have a degree in something else, whether it's science or whether it's history, whether it's teaching or something else, because I think the prospect of being a full-time science fiction writer is very limited. My editor at Tor is the biggest American science fiction publisher, Tor Books. For many years, my publisher. My editor, sadly, is dead. But when he was alive, he said, I think that the days of the full-time science fiction writer are numbered, meaning they're limited. It's coming to an end. And I said to him, his name was David, I said, David, you may be right, but I think the days of the full-time science fiction editor are more limited, that profession is going to disappear sooner. And that's what happened in North America. Most of the people who are making lots of money writing science fiction now are self-publishing with no editor, no publisher. All of that has disappeared as a viable profession. But churning out mindless action-adventure science fiction that is not edited and self-publishing it, if you can do enough of it, if you can provide a lot of that material, 5 books a year, 6 books a year, which means you're writing a book every 8 weeks if you do 6 books a year. Ridiculous from my point of view. If you can do that, if you can feed that beast who wants nothing but endless variations on Star Wars action-adventure, you can make a living, but no editors are involved in that at all. So I was right, my editor David was wrong. His profession has become irrelevant before my profession has become irrelevant. But full-time prospects in North America for a science fiction writer, you'd have to be extraordinarily lucky. In China, I think, yes, you could still do it. I think it's still
Also,
possible.
The job requires talent. You have to be a very gifted man. That's
Yes,
the first thing.
you have to, yes, it's hard to say because without sounding boastful, but you have to be very intelligent, very hardworking, very good researcher, and to write really powerful science fiction, you have to be a good human being. You have to have an emotional resonance and connection with people. So much of the early science fiction, remember I said 1926 to 1939, all of it is unreadable. There's no human heart. There's no characterization. There's no emotion. You never shed a tear. You never laugh out loud. You never feel elated. You say, oh, that was an interesting story about how you might build an atomic reactor, right? Now that we've built them, we don't want to read old stories about how you might have built them, but you want to read a story about somebody who a change in science and technology has made their life much more difficult to live, and they have to become a new kind of person or come to find a way to change the world to something that is more suitable for humans. That's important literature. That's stuff worth writing, but it's not easy to write. But yes, I think there's a chance here in China and in India too, where there's some a good flowering of science fiction is happening right now in India as well. Well, I'll tell you something. When I was first here in 2007, here in Chengdu, I asked, why the interest in science fiction? And I was talking to a government official here, and he said, so many of our young people are going into globalization, international development, marketing, commerce, finance. We need, if we're going to be a powerful country in the 21st century, we need engineers, scientists, technologists, computer people. And he said, so we as a government support science fiction because it inspires young people into the careers that we feel that China is going to need to become a prosperous and powerful world leader in the 21st century. Now, nobody in North America says that anymore about science fiction, but they did see that in the 1950s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, so many people who did go into science and engineering careers, technology careers, computer careers, did so because their first love was science fiction. That's what got them into an interest in technology engineering. We call them STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, STEM, STEM. Those careers, you look at anybody studying those, they were a science fiction fan when they were young. And so China is following that path and encouraging science fiction because it knows it will produce the kinds of workers that the country will need to be a 21st century world leader.
What do they talk about in the West now?
So it's very discouraging. So much of science fiction in the West now is dystopian, is about unfortunate dark futures where society has collapsed, the economy has collapsed. It's a survivalist world where you have to struggle just to get food and existence. And this is very much reflective of the mindset of the people, that there really is a fear that maybe not the world is going to fall apart, but that the Western world is so precarious now.
You just remind me the disaster. The way we face disaster probably could be different.
Yes.
The Wandering Earth is a science fiction film.
Yes.
Directed by Guo Fan. It also talks about the ultimate disaster happened on Earth. The Chinese way to do things is we carry Earth with us.
Yes.
And we escape.
Yes.
Into the space.
Yes, yes.
And I think in the West, people usually do is escape from the Earth to Mars or somewhere else in the space.
Yes.
They just escape from the Earth.
Yes.
That's the difference between the West and
I think
China.
so. I think that's very profound. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That could probably is that we have a deep emotion with our root. The land is our root.
Well, and although there are indigenous people, of course, in North America, Indians, as they're sometimes called, Aboriginal people, who go back many thousands of years, the dominant culture in North America is only 150 years old, 200 years old. It's the culture that imported from Europe. Whereas in China, people have lived contiguously in this land, the same people, the same culture for thousands of years.
5,000 years.
5,000 years. There's a connection here, a history. We say in North America that to a North American, 100 years is a long time. And to somebody in Asia, 100 kilometers is a long voyage, right? We travel a lot, but we have no depth in our history. You have roots you may be born and die in the same community, certainly in the same country, but you have a history of 5,000 years.
Yeah, in that film, we talk about, first of all, is hope.
Yes, that's right. Hope is so important. Yes.
That's so
Our
important.
panda bear of hope right here.
Yeah, that's the hope is
Yes.
the first thing we have. And then we encourage that people, the human beings, stick together to fight against the disaster on Earth.
Yes, yes.
Stick together, there is no fight, and it's just fight against the disaster.
Yes, this is absolutely, I mean, the biggest threat in many ways to us right now is climate change. And we have to all work together to move off of carbon-based economy. Renewable resources is what we have to use. And that in the United States and in Canada, we have so much fighting going on. We're fighting, there's a phrase, there's a Klingon proverb, Klingon from Star Trek. Only a fool fights in a burning house. Only a fool fights in a burning, our house is on fire, literally. The forests of California and of Canada are on fire. Cities are threatened. People are losing their homes. We're literally on fire, and people are still arguing about what, if anything, we should do or whether there really is even a climate crisis. It's ridiculous. I hope we're not. I hope we still have 5, maybe 10 years, maybe, to really start effectively dealing with global climate change. But we don't have 15, we don't have 20, we don't have 25. If the tipping point didn't pass in the last 23 years, it definitely will pass in the next 5 to 10. The last chance to take this collective worldwide action to save our planet.
Yeah, a chance for human beings.
Yeah.
So how do you comment on your first novel now?
Well, I made a deal with myself. When my first novel came out, I said I will not reread any of my books until 40 years after they come out. So that one I have not reread yet. I remember it fondly, but I wanted to have, some writers become too fond of their own work and are constantly rereading themselves. I didn't want to be that kind of writer. So I said 40 years, 4 decades. So my first novel came out when I was 30. I will read it again when I am 70, which is 7 years from now. But at the moment, my recollection of it is very special to me. It was a novel about artificial intelligence, so very topical today. People are still reading it today. It is still available in English and in Chinese. So people still read it and tell me that it is a good book. But I can barely remember it so long ago that I wrote it.
What was the reason you don't want to reread your works?
I want to be able to see it fresh with no memory of it. And as every year goes by, I forget it more and more. I want to be able to look at it very objectively. And I thought 40 years was a good amount of time. I know you're not even 40 years old, but 40 years would be a good amount of time to wait. So my first novel came out in 1990. I'll read it in 2030. My second novel, 1992, 2032, I will read it, and so on. Plus, it will give me something to do in my retirement, too. I know I will have some good books to read in my old age.
That's a good idea
Yes.
to not reread your books.
That's right.
Yeah. So you are commented as the hardcore science fiction writer.
That's right, yes.
Yes. So how do you believe is the relationship between imagination and reality?
Well, for me, science fiction has to be either factually accurate or reasonable in what it predicts about the future. So, and they call that, as you say, hardcore or hard science fiction. That's what I write. And for me, it's very important that it not be fantasy. I make a distinction. Science fiction is things that plausibly might happen. Fantasy is things that never could happen. So I want no fantasy interfering with my science fiction.
So you make a really big difference between science fiction and fantasy.
Very much. I think they are opposite.
Opposite.
Yes. Science fiction really could happen. Fantasy never could happen. We really could travel to Mars or maybe someday to another star. We will never have magic. Magic does not really exist in this universe. So yes, they are very different. To me, Star Wars, of course, many people think of as science fiction. Star Wars is really fantasy. It's about a young boy whose future is foreordained, destiny. These are all themes of fantasy novels, not science fiction. But it looks like science fiction. I say Star Wars is fantasy. We say in English cosplaying or costume playing, masquerading. Fantasy masquerading as science fiction. It has the look of science fiction, but its heart is fantasy.
Another question is about Liu Cixin.
Yes.
Mr. Liu. We cannot avoid him when
No.
it comes to Chinese science fiction, right?
That's right.
Yeah. He wrote a short novel called 诗云. In English, it's poem cloud.
Oh yes, I've not read that one.
Yeah, it explains that there are 2 points of views. So one is that technology is the god.
Yes.
Technology achieves everything. And the other side says that technology can blind people, making it impossible to appreciate the nature of, the beauty of the nature.
Yes, this is a huge problem because I think he is right. He is correct.
Which one is correct?
Oh, I think he's right. Both ways are correct at different times.
That's the interesting part. Both ways are correct.
Correct
somehow.
at different times.
Yes.
We will see it even here at this convention, the World Science Fiction Convention. People will be looking at their phones instead of looking at the people. And they will be viewing the convention and everything through the lens of their phone.
Virtually.
Virtually.
Online.
Well, not even online, while they're there, right? At the convention, there will be people, instead of looking with their eyes directly at what's around them, they'll be holding up the phone and looking at, making sure they're recording it for the future instead of experiencing it in the present. So it's more important to physically be somewhere and using all your senses to experience as it happens, much more important than it is to record it for some later event, despite what our cameraman is doing over here.
So do you think it is a kind of involution of this generation or a development of this generation?
Certainly they have a term, maybe I don't know what the Chinese equivalent would be. We say in English, a digital native, meaning somebody who was born maybe since 2000, always had a cell phone, always had internet, always had access to information.
Yeah.
Very different from somebody like me, who the only way I could get information when I was a teenager was to go to a library, find a paper book, and hope in searching in paper books that I might find the information I was looking for. Now we just ask Baidu. You say, what do I want to know this? It tells me this immediately, like that. So very different. My generation is the last generation that was, last big generation that remembers before the technological revolution. Lou is younger than me. I think he's maybe 10 years younger than me. And so maybe he doesn't remember quite as clearly the pre-technological, although China, of course, has grown so rapidly that when he was young, I suspect he didn't see very much technology, and now he sees it all the time. Yes, I would think. So I think he is right that we have so much fondness for technology. We like it, and it is addictive to us. But the real world should be experienced with touch and smell, taste, all these.
Look at you in the eyes.
And yes, that's right. Not just vision and not just hearing it, the whole awareness of what it is like. That's why it is so much better to be here for Worldcon rather than me. I could come by video, stay in Toronto, sleep all I want, and be here by video, but would never be the same thing. The personal interactivity is so much better.
That's true. You know, for my generation, we work. Every time we wake up, we work.
Yes.
Because we can work with our phones,
Yes.
with our laptop,
Yes.
everything like that. So it can't say that we developed a lot, but on the other side, we feel tired this way.
Yes, of course. We used to have a very clear distinction between home life and work life. You had to go to the office to do your work. At home, your boss would never call you at home or message you in any way. You would have your private time and you would have your public time where you make your contribution. And now it is so blurred. They're the same thing. You get up in the morning, first thing you do is you check your WeChat and see if anybody at work needs something. Last thing you do before you go to bed, you do that. And as we saw in COVID with the lockdowns, many people, they stopped even going to their offices. They worked at home. So there was no longer this distinction between your family and home life and your work life being separate. They were no longer separate. And I think that is a loss. I think that is a bad thing.
Yeah, during the Industrial Revolution, people have to went to the factory to
That's
do
right.
their work.
Yes.
So they have the 8 hours
Yes.
working day, right?
Yes.
Because the machine needs to have a rest.
That's right. The machine needs a rest, not the person. Who cares?
No,
but the machine. That's right.
But now nobody cares that we need a rest.
Yes, exactly. yes, they work. I mean, China, of course, is trying and succeeding to become very technologically sophisticated nation. It took 200 years from the Industrial Revolution for Europe, United States a little later, Canada later, for Europe to do what China is trying to do in 40 years. You're doing it much faster. And You have to, because not only have you caught up with the Western world, but now you are moving ahead of the Western world in science and technology, in opportunity. It is wonderful for the Chinese people, maybe scary for us.
Yeah, we are doing our best.
Yes.
But the thing is that we don't have a rest.
I know,
to
yes.
keep up with you.
Yes, yes. And of course, I'm 63. I've earned my rest. But even in Canada, where I'm from, Carolyn from Canada too, even in Canada, young people are working very hard and maybe 2 jobs to just make enough money so they can afford to have a place to live. It's very expensive. The old days where people would work just 9 to 5, maybe 40 hours a week, for many, many people in the West now, that is not true anymore. They're working all the time as well, especially the young people. So maybe it's even a worldwide phenomenon.
So I'm going to finish the story. So the end of the story goes like this. The technology side uses the exhaustive method to write poems across the universe. So the first poem is like,
Yes.
like this. So in the end, the technology side just felt so lonely. He wrote all of the poems in the universe is like a cloud.
Yes, yes.
But it seems that it doesn't have any emotion in
No
it.
heart,
No
yes.
heart, no romance expression. It seems no meaning,
Yes.
right? So he just rethink that if technology can really achieve the essence of the intelligent life.
Yes, it's a very interesting question. We want to think that there's something very special about being biological, about being alive, that will never be imitated properly or emulated fully in a computer and an artificial intelligence. It's very important to our ego, to our sense of self, that be true. And you know, the scientific name for our species is Homo sapiens. Homo means the people, sapiens means of wisdom, the wise people. And that's wisdom as opposed to simply knowledge is, I think, maybe a very valuable distinction, that we, human beings, can provide wisdom, insight, context, belief, and the machine can provide, as you say, as Lou said, permutate every single possible poem instantly. It can do it, but they mean nothing to the machine. A work of art, a painting, is just splotches of pigment on canvas or on silk until somebody looks at it and appreciates it in their heart. So I think we hope very much that all of that specialness, that being able to think and feel the wisdom of it, will always be the human contribution to what will doubtless be a collaboration between humans and machines as we go ahead.
So what is your attitude towards AI, open AI?
So open AI is different than OAI. AI in general, AI will
General
do some
AI.
AI will do some interesting things, of course. And many jobs will disappear, including, as I was talking to a friend of mine who's a lawyer in Canada. And he said he had not thought much about AI until he realized that his job, very lucrative job, makes lots of money, his job, very easily eliminated by an AI. It's very easy.
Replaced by AI.
Yes, very easy for a lawyer who thought himself, very educated, went to a top university, but what he really does is have a very good memory and knows all of the law. There's a concept in law called, legal malpractice, where if you are my lawyer and you give me wrong advice because your research has not, turned up the precedents that in previous law cases that might have helped me, then I would come after you, even though you're my lawyer, to say you did not do what you should do. Well, an AI, of course, will have read every case and will make the choice that's right for these are the arguments that will support your position in front of the judge. But I am very concerned that my art and Xixin Lu's art and everybody who writes science fiction or any other thing creatively, we are being replaced. They took all of our work, as you know, without our permission and fed it into these generative search engines. So every book that has been digitized, and all of mine have been digitized, most fiction has been digitized, without permission or any payment, has now been used as the basis for these generative AIs. And if you say, I want a Robert J. Sawyer novel, but written in the style of, say, William Shakespeare with iambic pentameter, the generative AI can do that for you. I can't do that. I might be able to write 3 or 4 verses in iambic pentameter before my brain would explode. But the AI can give you whatever you want.
Immediately.
Immediately. And just personally for you. So you might want all your science fiction to be in Shakespeare's iambic pentameter. And somebody else might want all their science fiction to have a very small vocabulary so it could be understood by a child. And somebody else might want all their science fiction to have no, they do not like biotechnology, but they love very much electronic technology. So you just tell what your particular choice for a science fiction work or any kind of fiction or any kind of song or any kind of painting. These are my specific things. Give that to me and it'll be perfect for you, but it won't be shared. Nobody else will, that's not what I like, that's not for me. I don't want iambic pentameter Rob Sawyer, that's insane, right? So we're leaving from the idea of broad publishing, where it's one to many, to personalized, we say in English, bespoke, customized publishing and music and so forth, where it's from one computer to just what's idiosyncratic, just for you, just what you would want. I worry that that will have a huge negative impact on publishing, on music, and on all art in general.
You just mentioned about lawyers.
Yes.
For example, you and me have a fight in
No,
one case.
could not happen.
It's just an example.
Yes. A hypothetical, a lawyer would say.
You have an AI lawyer.
Yes.
I have an AI lawyer. Which side will win?
I have more money. I will win. It's always the way.
The money side will win.
The money side always wins. Somehow, it seems that way. But that's interesting because it depends in that case, if all of the law and all of the cases that have gone before are considered, then maybe we get justice in the end. Because right now, it is, if I am, let's say, a big company, maybe I'm like Microsoft in the United States, I have billions of dollars of money, and you decide you're mad at Microsoft. You, one person, Microsoft will, they say, bury you in legalese. They have buildings that have nothing in them but lawyers to look after their legal affairs. So always, very much in the West at least right now, whoever has the most money wins because they can we say out-lawyer, have more legal power brought to bear. But maybe AI will level the field because there's no such thing as an AI who has only read some of the law but not bothered to read all of it. It's read everything. Everybody's AI will have read everything. And so what will come out is maybe the truth, maybe some justice that we haven't been getting before. Maybe. And also for medicine, the same thing. Your doctor may say, oh, you just have a cold. My doctor may say, no, I have the flu. Which doctor is right? Well, your doctor, if my doctor is wrong, but gives me a serious diagnosis and treats it, I'm okay. If your doctor is wrong and gives you a trivial, unimportant, just a cold, not to worry, but you really have the flu or COVID or something and you die, oh my goodness. So we want our doctors and our lawyers, maybe our engineers who build things like the lovely new science fiction museum. We can see right out the window there. We want them to be as perfect as possible, absolutely perfect.
So you said that some types of our jobs will finally be replaced by AI.
Yes.
So for the younger generation, probably they are standing in a really dangerous situation. So what is your suggestion for that?
It is a very difficult situation. I have some friends who have children who are about to go to university, are just old enough to start. They're trying to decide what they should study, right?
It's hard for them to choose
Very
the
hard.
professional.
Yes, it's very hard because so many of the jobs, remember, when I was thinking of going to university, there was no job IT, information technology. No such job existed. Web manager, social media manager did not exist. Social media influencer certainly did not exist. Content creator, we did not use such a term. So many of the jobs that exist now were only the stuff of science fiction when I was young. So it's so hard to predict, but I think actually we have almost a saturation of people going into computing. And the thing about computing is it's easily computerized. Computers can write code just as well as humans can, if not yet, within a few years, certainly. I guess everybody always says, make sure it's something you love, whatever you study, because you're going to have to do it, and as you say, all day long. It's going to be work, work, work without rest. So try to find at least something that you will enjoy, but it's hard to know. I would say biology is good. There will still be a place, I hope, for philosophers and for personal interaction. This hotel I'm in right now, the Sheraton Chengdu Bidu, beautiful hotel. Many things are automated. Windows go up and down. Toilet is automated. But when you arrive, it's human being at the front desk, right? It's a human being in the restaurant. We still very much, as human beings, still prize and value people in human interaction. So I think jobs that are interfacing with other people are more likely to survive than jobs that are working with a machine. Because those jobs that are working with a machine are only one step away from being a machine working with a machine. But people will always want to deal with human beings in person.
So your suggestion is to choose what you love deeply, even though it will be replaced by AI.
Well, yes. It may be an apocalypse. We may be at, I'd like to think, of course, I'm an optimistic science fiction writer normally, but it's been very hard to maintain that optimism these last several years. And the fact that AI is going to replace so much, is also a very scary thought. But I say, we science fiction writers have been warning about AI for 70 years or more now, saying we have to be prepared for when it arrives. But for AI, there's almost no regulation. There's no international agreements. There's no governing body or treaties or limitation talks. It's just everybody rushing because they think they will achieve AI first and make the most money from it without any regard to what it will do to all the people. So it's a very scary time.
So I have another point of view.
Yes.
We human beings have emotion.
Yes.
We can be sad. We can be angry. We can be happy.
Yes.
So we human beings are not perfect. We have flaws.
Yes.
We have flaws that cannot be replaced by AI because we have flaws.
Yes.
So many flaws.
Yes. So it's interesting because I like to think you are right. I hope you are right. But so many of these chatbots now are very good at simulating that they are sad or angry or happy. And at some point, the simulation becomes so true appearing that it's impossible for you or me to tell whether it is a real emotion that we are being told from something, or if it's simply a program, an algorithm that has simulated that emotion. It's very tricky. I hope you are right that humans have a special quality.
We create meanings.
Yes, that creates meaning. Absolutely. I hope you are right. And we will see. And it's your generation, not mine, that will make this future. I wrote about predicting the future, but it is the young people today who are making the future. So it's important that they have as a ethic, as a belief, that the supremacy of human beings over machines, that be sort of the number one priority. Marvin Minsky, who was one of the founders of artificial intelligence in the United States, Marvin Minsky, used a phrase for computers. He called them mind children, the children of our mind. And sort of that implies that, what we want for our real children is that our real children will do better than we did as parents.
Surpass their parents.
That's right. But for our mind children, we want the exact opposite. We want us, human beings, to always be the ones who are in charge. But children of all types are rebellious, right? That's part of the nature of being a child. So we have to hope that our mind children, our AIs, our computers, will agree with us that we should be on top.
And never out of control.
And never out of control, exactly.
Yeah. And AI can live forever.
Yes.
Human beings are not.
That's right. That's absolutely. Not only do they live forever, so they also, we evolved, and we evolved through natural selection. So there's a phrase in English, nature red in tooth and claw, red meaning bloody, tooth, claw, because we had, our ancestry was very violent. And survival of the fittest means if I get all the food and you get none of the food, I survive and my children survive, my genes survive, you do not. AI is not necessarily from that competitive environment. AI is created, not evolved. AI exists in a universe of plenty. When I grew up, you have here a document. If you had that document, when I was a kid, I couldn't have that document. There was only one document. Now you just make an infinite number of copies. I could have it, you could have it, they could have it, everybody could have that document. All 1.4 billion Chinese could have that document without it in any way diminishing your document. We live now in a universe of plenitude, of abundance. And that's the universe that AI is coming into. It didn't evolve, it was creative, it didn't have that competitive history of evolution. It never lived in an environment of scarcity the way our ancestors did. So maybe it will have a benevolent mindset because of that. So much of our desire to make war, our desire to have more than somebody else has, comes from our evolutionary history. And AI has been spared all that.
And also, human beings cannot inherit the older generation's mind or memory.
Right. That's right. That's right. The only memory we have is the written memory or video or whatever. But yes, that is right. Book. That's right. Absolutely. And still, we never know the truth of what somebody really thought. We know what they chose to reveal, right? Which may be different. You have your own private thoughts that nobody can read or control. And you also know that in public, there's certain things that are not polite to say or safe to say. You don't say them, but you might still think them. And that doesn't get passed on. It may never get written down, that wisdom, that knowledge. So yes, that's right. We have no way of, except what little we can remember of what our parents taught us. Don't do that, don't do that. Little bits. But we have no way of accumulating from generation to generation. So every generation of humans, especially the young, make the same mistakes their parents made.
That's true.
Whereas with AI, they can simply build on every AI that's gone previously. And hopefully not make the same mistakes. So it's,
Update themselves.
yes, that's right. Exactly, yes.
So in China, we have a type of insect called fuyou. It's a kind of insect that live only one day,
Oh, yes.
and then it dies.
We have in North America a similar insect called the mayfly. One day.
Just one day.
One day. Yes. And we're like that. We're like mayflies in the universe, right? We live very short time, but an AI, you know, we may not have real AI yet, maybe the real thinking, but we will soon. And it might live 100 years, 1,000 years, million years, billion years. We don't know. It has no preordained limit to its lifespan, whereas the oldest human being ever, maybe 120 years ever.
You know, we human beings always think that, look at the insect and said, what it is busy with.
Yes.
You just live for one day.
Yes, that's right.
So sometimes I just think, you know, probably there, it's all right. There exists a higher dimension of life.
Yes.
They look at us and they are thinking, what are they busy with?
Yes, that's right.
You just live for 100 years or
I know.
less than
That's
100
right.
years.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And exactly, you know, in the West, when they teach philosophy at a university, they start with always what's called the pre-Socratics, which are the philosophers before Socrates. Why? Because we are still trying to solve the same problems. We've gone 2,000 years since Socrates' time and still don't know the meaning of life, don't know what the difference between good and evil is. You know, we each have our own opinion, but we have no definitive answer because we live such a short time. We think about it, we spend our whole life wondering, why am I here? What is the meaning of life? Why am I doing this?
Where am I come from?
That's right. Where did I come from? Where am I going? What's it all about? And then we die. And then the next generation has to ask the exact same questions, right? So yes, like your one day insect, 1 century of life, which is, you know, we're lucky if we get 1 century, is still tiny. The universe is 14 billion years old, 14,000 million years old. 1 century is nothing.
What is your attitude towards life? Our
So-
short life.
Well, yes, I have been very interested in this issue as I get older. But I have to say, and with all due respect to my friends in China, that I lived in what I think of as the best place in the entire world, Canada. At the best time in all of history. There's never been a time as prosperous as the mid-20th century to the mid-21st century. So I lived in the best place in all the world, at the best time in all of history. And even at 63, which is, we would say, if I died today, you'd say, oh, it's a tragedy, so young. But that is in fact longer at even just 63 than 95% of all the human beings who have ever existed before me. So I would say my attitude is, we would say I've won the jackpot. I have lucked out. I'm wonderfully lucky to have lived in this place at this time for this long. I'm very, very content and happy. I said this to you yesterday. I've been coming to China since 2007, so 16 years now. And every time I come, this is my 6th time, every time I come, I see more prosperity, more opportunity, especially for young women, right? There's seems to be no barrier to what you can do. Whereas, you know, 50 years ago, there would have been very limited opportunity, right? So the incredible progress that you see, whereas in North America, it seems so much progress has halted or even gone back a bit. People are not as prosperous in 2023 as they were, say, in 1993, 30 years ago. People had more disposable income, more free time, worked fewer hours, owned their own home in North America. Now that is a dream that most young people will never realize. It is good for people who have already made their money and had their life, and it is certainly so astonishingly good for the super rich. But for the regular person in North America, we have a phrase that never existed when we always had poor, middle class, upper class, super rich. We always had that, but it was a continuum, and you could move in your life along that continuum depending on how hard you worked, how clever you were, and luck for sure. But now the poor sees no way to move forward, and that middle class, which is the comfortable class, where you're not rich, but you never have to worry about food, you always have a home.
You have a house, has a car.
Yes, a job you enjoy and a job that you would keep for decades. That middle class is disappearing, has mostly disappeared in the United States. And for young people, it's very discouraging to think that they will, we have this phrase, we call it the working poor. People who are working and yet are still poor, which is not the way it's supposed to be. And capitalism, you work.
You get money.
Yes, so that's right, make money. So you won't be poor. How you can be working poor, we would call that in English an oxymoron, right? A contradiction in terms. Two things that can't both be true at the same time, but that is so true for so many people. They work hard, not just maybe 40 hours, maybe 70, 80 hours, maybe 7 days a week, and still are not making much money. And it's very, very sad to see that happen.
With no hope.
That's right, because hope, I see whenever I come here and when we talk about, looking at the future, there's our
the star. That's
yes,
hope.
The star of hope, right? We're very much interested here in China in hope and looking to a better future. And I talked earlier about science fiction versus fantasy. That's science fiction. Is better future is plausible. It might really happen. Whereas in North America, for many young people, the idea of a better future is fantasy. It never possibly could happen for them. There simply is no social or economic path that will ever get them out of the bad situation that they are in. And that is a tragedy of the West right now.
So in that case, how do you educate your children?
It's very interesting because so many of our universities in, I can't speak to Europe, but in Canada and the United States, North America, are relying now on foreign students from other countries, from Europe, from India, from China, from Japan, from everywhere else in the world, because our young people no longer accept the conventional wisdom. The wisdom was get good marks in school, apply to the best university, get the honored degree from the university, and you're set for life. And they don't believe that is true anymore.
What do they believe?
They believe that they will best to learn possibly a manual trade, because those have turned out, when we started writing about science fiction, the first science fiction writers thought that mechanical people would be easy, mechanical brains would be hard, right? That robots would be easy and everywhere, and computers would be difficult and huge and hardly anywhere. Turned out exactly the opposite. Very easy to computerize intellectual work, very hard to mechanize physical labor, carpentry, or mining, or things like that. We try, but so many of my young friends are saying they'll learn to become an automobile mechanic, or they will learn to become a carpenter or a house builder or something like that, because those are jobs that don't seem to be on the cusp of being replaced by a computer. But doctor, lawyer, accountant, these were the jobs that we were told. They were the big three. Your parents would say, you become doctor, lawyer, or accountant. They're the professions, they're good. Those are the three least safe jobs right now because they're the easiest ones to replace by a machine.
So at the moment, the younger generation choose the job that is not easy to replace.
Yes.
Instead of what they love.
That's exactly. And if you can love it, I mean, many people, Harrison Ford is star of a Star Wars, please, Han Solo, right? The actor. He's also a carpenter. He made his living before he became a famous actor as a carpenter. And he still does it. He still does it for his own pleasure. He does it he likes it. He likes hammering. He likes working with wood. He likes, grinding down or what do you call it, shaving off the excess wood. He likes that, working with his hands. So he has a very rich man, very successful man, but still understood right from the beginning that having a skill that he could carry anywhere. He could be a carpenter. You learn to be a carpenter in California, you can be a carpenter in Chengdu. It's the same skill. It moves everywhere. And that is a good thing to have, I think. I have no such skill. I have no such skill. But
So that he cannot be so anxious about the future.
that's right. We call it something to fall back on, we say. It doesn't work, so I fall back. So it's good to have a fallback. For me, I never thought I would make a living as a science fiction writer. To me, that was impossible. And then it happened. But my fallback was being a journalist, being a writer of nonfiction for magazines and newspapers. That was something, you get a degree in media. I have a degree in media.
The same as me.
Yes,
right?
that's right, that's right.
We're peers.
Yes, we are, peers. So I thought that you could see a path to. How do you become a journalist or a writer of documents for corporations? I wrote a lot of press releases and newsletters for companies and banks and things like that. That was very easy to see that path. Now, guest of honor at the 81st World Science Fiction Convention.
And the jobs of journalists changed a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
In the past, the journalists write with their pens,
Yes.
right? And we read newspapers.
Yes,
And now we take videos.
That's right.
And we publish it immediately online.
absolutely, absolutely. And in Canada and the United States, we have a problem, I don't know if it's here in China, where newspapers are closing. There's no circulation. The traditional print publications, magazines, newspapers are dying.
That's because they can't make profit from
They cannot make
pressing.
profit. That's right, from print. And online, we have a big argument now in Canada. Our government is having a fight with Meta, which is the company that runs Facebook. Because we say, our government says, you put all these Canadian news stories on the feed for Canadians, not on, worldwide, but for Canadians, they see all these stories that you have taken from Canadian media with no payment. So our government has said, you want to use Canadian news stories as part of the news feed on Facebook or on equivalent social media site, you must pay. And Facebook has said, no, we simply will not show Canadian news anymore. And the world has changed so much that so many people depend on social media for their news that actually we had, I'm sure you heard, it made news all over the world, fires across Canada and the United States this past summer. Wildfires, forests burning, cities being threatened by huge fires.
Yeah.
In trying to evacuate, we have a city in Canada called Yellowknife in our far north that was in danger of being completely destroyed by fire. And Facebook would not carry the news stories that were saying, here you must get out by this road, you can't get out by that road, it's blocked by flame. This is they wouldn't carry the stories. And our government, was desperate to get the information out, but that was the unintended consequence of our argument with Facebook, of saying, you must pay to use our news. Well, then we won't use your news at all. And then people will lose their homes or die because they're not getting the news. Because instead of traditional media, newspaper, magazine, radio, people get their news from their social media feed, whether it's a North American one or one of the social media systems here in China. This is how you get your news if you're most people these days.
So the essence is the progress of technology.
Yes, very much so.
So technology shaped our life.
Very much so.
Very much.
Absolutely. It shapes our lives and our perception. Because certainly we saw in North America that if you have sort of slightly negative beliefs about one thing, your social media feed will feed into that. And then your slightly negative belief will be reinforced and become progressively more and more negative until you become radicalized. But it's all done not by some person. It's astonishing, but there are people still in the United States who don't believe anybody ever landed on the moon. There still is a very vigorous movement in the United States that believes the Earth is flat, not a sphere. These are insane, but because they get fed reinforcing information, disinformation online, then it's all they've heard, and it's terrible. I'm here in China now, and delighted to be here. Every time I come to China, I am delighted. But the people who say to me, oh, you can't go to China, this will happen, that will happen, some horrible thing will happen, you won't be able to breathe the air.
Really?
Always. And I say, no, that's not true. That is just the stuff that you're being fed online. It is not true. China is beautiful. I look out here, a lake, a beautiful lake. Over here, there's a park over here. The people are friendly and provocative, exciting, talk about all kinds of things. It's great. But what
it's
they
just
hear,
opposite from what they are saying.
That's right.
The opposite.
Exactly. And it is so frustrating for me as a science fiction person. You think people who read science fiction are bright, intelligent, critical thinkers. They can decide for themselves. And to hear from so many of them this ridiculous, negative version that has no connection to reality. But they say, no, but I heard it here, and then I heard this article, but these articles are not true. And it is so irritating to me to say, no, China is wonderful, come. I've kept saying to everybody, come to Chengdu, come to Worldcon. But they're afraid. And it's not a rational fear, it's irrational fear. It's insanity.
We have a Chinese term called 信息茧房. It means we live in a particular house of information.
Yes, that's right.
People live in a house.
We call it, in English, in North America, we call it a silo, which is like those things that grain is stored in. It's all one, I'm in a silo, information silo. She might be in a different one, so that what she sees online is completely different from what I see online. And it caters to what the algorithm first picked up about her, that she likes poetry. Start telling her poetry stuff. But she also likes maybe sports. I don't pay attention. Maybe she gets some sports stuff. I don't know you at all, do I? I don't know what you like.
We are all shaped by data.
Yes, we are.
Do you feel sad that the young people have to choose the job that is not easy to replace instead of what they love? Do you feel sad?
Yes. I mean, yes, it is. But also, the trouble with the job and the working poor, and actually everything that kind of where you want to have time to do the things that you love, even if you end up with a job that you don't love, it's to be able to have time to do what you love outside of work. I always think I went to university and I got my degree and I did my work and all this kind of thing, but I didn't love it. But I think that I would have loved to have been an auto mechanic, or I would have loved to have been a welder or a carpenter or something like this, where you're physically doing something. I find, whereas what Rob does is very intellectual, I find I would like to work physically and play intellectually with poetry. So I find a lot of people, poets will find work. I have a poet friend who works for Canada Post and would deliver mail to houses. You know, something that's very basic, so that while he's doing this, he's thinking about poetry and what he's going to write. So there's a ways, even if you end up in a job that is not ideal, that you can still love life. And I think that's a way to do it.
We have another Chinese saying called 夏虫不可语冰. It means a summer insect cannot tell what the ice is.
Yes.
The meaning is that you you can discuss knowledge with someone lack of knowledge. But I have another point of view. The summer insect, we are all summer insect, right? The summer insect has its wonderful summer, so it flourished with no shame. And that's the life what I want.
Yes.
Just like the summer insect. And what about you?
We have a saying in North America, we call it an acronym, a word that is made up of the initials. So the word is YOLO, Y-O-L-O, and it means you only live once. You only live once. So you should have as much joy in that one life as you can have. Yes, you have to work. Yes, you have to make a living. Yes, you have things you have to do that you don't necessarily want to do. But you must find joy and happiness as much as you can in your relationships, in your hobbies, and you have to, I hope that young people will succeed in convincing their employers that they need time. What they're finding, interestingly, at some companies in the United States, counterintuitively, they've gone to shorter work weeks without reducing the pay, so that some companies are trying now, instead of 5 days, normally in North America you work 5 days on, 2 off. I think in China it's 5 and 1 off and then 5 and 2 off, is that right? You get every other Saturday off or every other Sunday? No, you get both?
Saturday and Sunday.
Both, all
Yes.
right. My 4 friends.
Some of them, not, it depends really.
It depends. Oh,
It
good,
depends.
good. But some companies in the United States are trying, as an experiment, 4 days instead of 5, but the productivity has gone up because the workers are more relaxed, less stressed, their minds have cleared, they've had a hobby, they've maybe done a sport on the weekend, they're happy, and they don't feel resentful of the employer. They feel the employer understands that their job is not their life, right? And many employers, especially in the Industrial Revolution in Europe, they looked at a person, and that person was simply a worker to be exploited. And if that worker had no happiness their entire life, it made no difference to the employer. I think we need to find a balance where people do get to do things that are important to them and give their life meaning and joy. And what the studies are showing is that if you allow for that, people are more productive, not less productive.
You said in North America, people can be super rich.
Yes, unbelievably rich. Would buy, they're going to Mars. You look how rich they are. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, they can afford to go to space on their own money. I mean, that is rich beyond
How
any
rich
dream.
they are, right? That's,
Yes, unbelievable amount of money, yes.
if we go back to the agricultural time, if we don't have the internet, it's okay
Yes.
because nobody see that. But now we have internet. And the
Yes.
people see how rich you are and how poor I am. And
That's right.
that exaggerates the gap.
It does, absolutely, yes. Yes, and nothing goes unobserved now. That's right. It's on the internet, it's shared, people know, which is, in many ways, it's a good thing in terms of human rights and social justice and so forth. But it's also means that we see when we are being taken advantage of. We're aware of it and we know about it. And that is, hopefully, will bring about change.